The sound of splintering plastic and metal echoed through the conference room as Brandon's fist smashed through the center of my prototype. 8 months of late nights, missed weekends with my daughter, and meticulous calibration work scattered across the polished floor in a spray of components. I couldn't believe what I was seeing as tiny, custom-machined parts skittered under chairs and rolled toward the walls. "This is garbage," Brandon announced, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. He turned toward the woman seated at the head of the table, instantly shifting into that smooth Harvard MBA charm I'd watched him deploy countless times. "We'll start over with a real solution. My name is Aaron Rodriguez. I'm 47 years old, and I've been a mechanical engineer for over 20 years. That prototype he just destroyed represented everything I'd been working toward. Medical equipment that could help veterans and disabled folks in areas where power grids fail, equipment that didn't need batteries or complex electronics to save lives. My legs felt weak as I stared at the destruction. That device was my answer to problems I'd watched my own father struggle with after Vietnam left him in a wheelchair. Problems that could be solved with better mechanical design, not fancier computers. The client, Diana Miller from the VA Medical Center, hadn't spoken much during my presentation. Now she studied the scattered remains with a look I couldn't read. Her eyes moved from the broken prototype to Brandon's satisfied smirk, then finally to my face. "Can I have your contact?" she asked quietly, her voice steady. The request caught me off guard. I fumbled in my pocket for my personal business card, the ones I'd printed myself when Brandon had forgotten to order them for me after my promotion to senior engineer. My fingers trembled slightly as I handed it to her. Brandon's smile faltered. "Diana, I assure you, our team will develop something much more aligned with industry standards. Aaron's approach is..." He hesitated, searching for the right dismissive term, experimental. "Impractical for real-world application." Diana pocketed my card without acknowledging his comment. "Thank you for your time today. I'll be in touch about next steps." As the meeting dispersed, I knelt on the floor, gathering the salvageable pieces of my work. Each component felt heavy in my hand. The titanium joint connectors I'd designed to withstand desert conditions. The pressure-adaptive hinges that required no electrical components. The weight-distributing frame that could be repaired with basic tools available anywhere in the world. "Leave it," Brandon said, standing over me once Diana had left. "Maintenance will clean up." I looked up at him. "These are custom parts. Parts for a project that's officially terminated," he replied, checking his expensive watch. The design review committee agreed with my assessment. "We're moving forward with the IoT-enabled framework." It suddenly clicked. "You never submitted my full documentation to the committee. You told me the meeting was next week." Brandon shrugged. "I made an executive decision to fast-track the process. Your design was never going to meet market requirements." He straightened his tie. "Take the rest of the day. Clear your head. Tomorrow you'll join Andrea's team on the sensor array project. A demotion. Not even thinly disguised. Let me back up and explain how I got here. I joined Medflow Dynamics here in Phoenix straight out of the Army, attracted by their mission statement about engineering solutions for underserved communities. After my father's struggles with faulty medical equipment during power outages in rural areas, I believed in that purpose completely. For 18 months, my ideas had been systematically sidelined. Brandon had arrived as our new division head, the CEO's son, fresh from Harvard Business School, and immediately established himself as someone who valued flash over function. He preferred solutions that looked impressive in boardroom presentations, sleek, connected, modern. The fact that such devices became useless paperweights without consistent power access was, in his view, a distribution problem, not a design problem. I'm a single dad. My daughter Sarah is 19 and in her sophomore year at Arizona State, which means every month I'm writing checks that make my bank account cry. At 47, I'm also that guy in the office, the one who remembers when we actually built things to last instead of building them to impress investors. The thing about Brandon is he's never actually built anything. His engineering degree came from MIT, but he went straight to business school, never spent time in a workshop, never had grease under his fingernails, never stayed up all night troubleshooting a design that could help real people. To him, engineering is just another business unit to optimize. But I've been in the trenches. I've seen what happens when a veteran's motorized wheelchair dies in the middle of nowhere because the battery gave out. I've watched my own father struggle with equipment that looked impressive but couldn't handle the reality of daily use. That's what drives me. building things that work when people need them most. Brandon never understood that. To him, my mechanical approach was old-fashioned. He wanted everything connected to the cloud, sending data streams, generating analytics reports. Never mind that half the places our equipment needed to work didn't have reliable internet, let alone the infrastructure to support his smart devices. The irony is that my father would have laughed at Brandon's approach. Dad was a marine mechanic in Vietnam. He knew that the best equipment was simple, reliable, and fixable with whatever tools you could find. Complexity was the enemy of functionality. But try explaining that to someone whose idea of hands-on experience is adjusting his ergonomic standing desk. 3 days after that disaster of a meeting, my personal cell phone rang with an unknown number. Aaron Rodriguez speaking. This is Diana Miller. My pulse quickened. I'm not sure how much I can share outside company channels. I understand your position, she replied, but I believe your approach has significant potential. Would you be willing to meet to discuss concepts only? We arranged to meet at a small workshop space near the industrial district. I brought only my sketchbook, nothing proprietary, nothing that would violate my employment contract, just concepts I could draw freehand. When Diana arrived, she introduced herself properly. She wasn't just any potential client. She was the regional director for VA Medical Services, responsible for equipment procurement across 8 Western states. Your approach solves problems we've struggled with for years, she said, examining my sketches. Battery dependency makes our devices useless in many rural areas. Even when we provide backup power systems, they're often repurposed for more immediate community needs. I felt vindicated but frustrated. I can't develop this properly without access to company resources. Use our workshop, she interrupted, gesturing to the space around us. I'm hosting the Regional Medical Technology Conference next month. Every major manufacturer and distributor will attend. I want you to demonstrate what's possible. Brandon will be there, I said. Diana's expression remained neutral. Yes, your manager has been invited. Does that concern you? It should have terrified me. But staring at the opportunity before me, the chance to finally demonstrate what I knew was possible, something shifted inside me. A determination I hadn't felt in years. Not anymore, I answered. For 3 weeks, I maintained a precarious double life. During the day, I worked on Andrea's team, dutifully running sensor diagnostics and keeping my head down. Brandon grew increasingly smug, assuming I'd learned my place. At night, I rebuilt my prototype in Diana's workshop, making improvements I'd only dreamed of when constrained by company resources. The VA's facilities weren't as advanced as MedFlow's, but they had something more valuable. Technicians who regularly repaired devices returned from the field. This joint fails constantly, said Steve, a wheelchair repair specialist, pointing to my initial design. Sand gets in here and locks it up. I redesigned it that night, creating a sealed bearing system that could be cleaned with compressed air. Each interaction taught me something new about real-world conditions my devices would face. The work was exhausting. I'd get home around midnight, grab a few hours of sleep, then head to MedFlow for my regular job. Sarah noticed the change in my routine. Dad, you're working too much again. Your hair's getting grayer. Just trying to build something that matters, kiddo. She gave me that look, the same one her mother used to give me when I got obsessed with a project. You always build things that matter. That's why Mom said, you were too good for this world. The divorce had been rough on both of us. Linda couldn't handle my tendency to prioritize meaningful work over high-paying projects. She wanted security, stability, a husband who came home at reasonable hours. I understood her perspective, but I couldn't change who I was. Sarah got it, though. She understood why I couldn't let go of work that might help people like her grandfather. Remember when you fixed Grandpa's walker? Sarah asked one evening while I sketched modifications at the kitchen table. He said it worked better than the fancy electronic one the VA gave him. That's because I actually listened to what he needed instead of what looked good in a catalog. Maybe other people need to hear that story. Sarah was right. This wasn't just about proving Brandon wrong or advancing my career. This was about continuing my father's legacy in a way. He'd spent his life maintaining equipment that kept Marines alive. Now I had a chance to build equipment that could keep veterans independent. The night before the conference, I stood back and looked at not just my rebuilt original design, but 2 additional prototypes addressing different mobility needs. All functioning without electrical power, all repairable with basic tools, all manufacturable at 40% lower cost than standard devices. The main unit was a mobility walker that could navigate rough terrain without motors. The frame adjusted for users of different heights through a simple mechanical system. Most importantly, every component could be repaired by the user with tools available at any hardware store. No specialized technicians required. No replacement parts that took weeks to order. The second prototype was a transfer board system that helped people move from wheelchairs to beds or cars. Traditional versions were static and often uncomfortable. Mine used a mechanical weight distribution system that adapted to the user's movements, reducing strain and improving safety. The third was a standing frame for rehabilitation therapy. Most electronic versions cost $15,000 and required constant calibration. Mine achieved the same therapeutic goals for $4,000 using mechanical principles that had worked for decades. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Diana asked, stopping by for a final check. I ran my hand along the main mobility device. "I've been ready for 20 years. I just needed someone to see it." Diana smiled. "You know, when I first started working with veterans, I thought the solution to their mobility challenges was always more technology, smarter devices, better sensors, more connectivity. But after visiting hundreds of rural communities and talking to thousands of veterans, I learned something important." She paused, examining one of my prototypes. "The best technology isn't the most advanced, it's the most reliable. It's the device that works when everything else fails. That's what you've built here." Her words hit me harder than I expected. For 18 months, I'd been made to feel like my approach was outdated, irrelevant, a relic of an older way of thinking. But Diana understood what I was trying to accomplish. The day of the conference arrived with a dust storm that matched my nerves. Wind whipped against windows as I transported my prototypes to the exhibition hall, each covered under protective tarps. I'd called in sick to work, sending a brief message to Andrea that I had food poisoning. By noon, my display was ready, but concealed behind partition walls that Diana had arranged. My work would remain hidden until my scheduled demonstration. I peeked through a gap in the partitions as attendees began filling the hall. Industry leaders, government representatives, and medical professionals from across the region mingled between elaborate company displays. The anxiety that had been building for weeks threatened to overwhelm me. Through the crowd, I spotted Brandon arriving with MedFlow's delegation. He moved confidently between groups, shaking hands and laughing about quarterly projections. He had no idea I was here, no idea what was coming. At precisely 2:30, Diana stepped onto the small stage at the center of the hall. The crowd quieted as she welcomed everyone to the VA's annual technology conference. "Today is about innovation that serves real needs," she said. "Not technology for its own sake, but solutions that work in every context, from urban centers to remote reservations." Her eyes found mine across the room. "Our first demonstration embodies that philosophy. Please welcome mechanical engineer Aaron Rodriguez." The partition walls were pulled back as I stepped forward. Murmurs spread through the crowd as people recognized the mobility devices arranged before them. Not as sleek or flashy as the electronic versions dominating the industry, but visibly different in design and function. My gaze caught Brandon's face in the crowd, the shock, the confusion, the dawning horror as he recognized me and understood what was happening. I savored that expression for one heartbeat before turning my attention to the wider audience. "These devices address different mobility needs," I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected, "but they share core principles. They function without electrical power, they can be maintained with basic tools, and they can be manufactured at 40% lower cost while lasting 50% longer." I moved to the first prototype, demonstrating how the mechanical system adjusted automatically to different surfaces. I invited an attendee to test it over a sample of rough terrain we'd installed. It can be maintained indefinitely in areas without consistent power or specialized technicians. Questions erupted from the crowd. I answered each one methodically, demonstrating features, explaining mechanical principles, showing repair procedures. VA representatives pushed forward with procurement forms. A medical device manufacturer asked about immediate licensing options. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brandon attempting to approach, only to be blocked by the density of the interested crowd. His face had shifted from shock to something darker, more calculating. "How does the weight distribution compare to motorized alternatives?" asked a procurement officer from New Mexico. I demonstrated the transfer board system. Traditional motorized units weigh 85 pounds and require charging stations. This weighs 12 pounds and never needs power. A user can carry it in their car trunk and deploy it anywhere. What about maintenance requirements? Called out a technician from Colorado. I pulled out a basic toolkit, the kind available at any hardware store. Every component can be serviced with these tools. No proprietary parts, no specialized training required. The entire system can be rebuilt for under $200 in replacement parts. The crowd pressed closer, examining connection points, testing adjustment mechanisms, asking about manufacturing scalability. I fielded questions about materials science, load calculations, and distribution logistics. This was the kind of technical discussion I'd been craving for months. People who understood that elegance came from simplicity, not complexity. A woman from the Phoenix VA raised her hand. We serve a large Native American population in remote areas. Power infrastructure is inconsistent. How would these devices perform in extreme temperature variations? The titanium alloy components are rated for 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, I replied. We've tested them in desert conditions and mountain environments. The bearing systems are sealed against dust and moisture. What about cost projections for bulk procurement? I had prepared for this question. Based on current material costs and simplified manufacturing processes, we're looking at 60% of the price point for equivalent electronic systems, with volume discounts potentially lower. As my demonstration concluded, applause rippled through the audience. People surged forward, eager to examine the prototypes more closely, to discuss potential applications. I noticed several people from my own company watching with expressions ranging from confusion to admiration. None dared approach while Brandon lingered at the periphery, his face growing darker by the minute. A government contracting officer from the Department of Veterans Affairs approached with a folder. Mr. Rodriguez, we'd like to discuss immediate pilot program opportunities. These designs address critical gaps in our current equipment inventory. We're particularly interested in the rehabilitation applications, added a physical therapist from the Phoenix VA. Our current standing frames have a 40% failure rate within the first year. Your mechanical approach could revolutionize therapy accessibility. As the crowd finally thinned, Diana approached with an older man I instantly recognized, Roger Bennett, the semi-retired founder of MedFlow Dynamics. My heart skipped. I hadn't seen him in person since my initial job interview 15 years ago. Fascinating approach, he said, running his hand along the frame of my primary prototype. Especially strange since your manager claimed these mechanical concepts were thoroughly explored and abandoned as impractical. My stomach dropped. He what? He's been dismissing your work across the industry, Diana explained matter-of-factly, claiming these designs were his early concepts that proved unfeasible during development testing. When did he say this? I asked. Last month at the Healthcare Innovation Summit in Denver, Roger replied. He gave a presentation on why MedFlow had pivoted entirely to IoT solutions. Your mechanical approach was specifically cited as a failed experimental pathway. Roger's expression hardened as he studied my face. I built this company to solve problems, not protect careers. I've maintained my board position. He handed me his card. We should discuss your future, with or without your current management. As they moved away, allowing other interested parties to approach, I caught sight of Brandon pushing through the crowd toward me. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by something closer to panic. Aaron, he called out, his voice tight. We need to talk. Now. I turned to face him, feeling calmer than I had in months. I'm busy with potential customers, Brandon. You understand how important customer relationships are, right? His jaw clenched. This is a serious breach of protocol. You've violated confidentiality agreements, used proprietary company time for unauthorized projects. Actually, interrupted a voice behind him, everything Mr. Rodriguez demonstrated was built using VA resources and pre-employment intellectual property. Diana had returned, flanked by Roger Bennett and what appeared to be a legal representative. We've reviewed the documentation thoroughly, she continued. These designs predate his employment with MedFlow and were developed entirely outside company resources. Brandon's face went pale as the implications sank in. That evening I returned to my apartment, physically and emotionally drained, but somehow lighter than I'd felt in months. Sarah was home from college for the weekend, and she took one look at me and said, "Dad, you look like you just ran a marathon, but also like you won something." The day had been a vindication I'd barely allowed myself to imagine. My phone had been buzzing continuously with messages from colleagues who'd been at the conference or heard about it secondhand. I ignored them all, needing space to process what had happened. Just after midnight, my phone lit up with Brandon's name. I watched it ring 5 times before finally answering. "Hello, Brandon. What the hell were you thinking?" His voice was tight, controlled anger vibrating beneath each word. "You violated every confidentiality clause in your contract today." "I didn't present company property," I replied calmly. "Every prototype at that demonstration was built with my own hands using VA resources based on my original concepts. Your concepts were developed on company time. My concepts predated my employment. Check my initial portfolio submission. These mechanical approaches were outlined in my military engineering work, which I specifically retained rights to in my employment agreement." A beat of silence. Then, "The founder's asking questions about your projects. What did you tell him?" "I didn't tell him anything. I showed him what's possible when innovation isn't being sabotaged." His tone changed instantly, the anger giving way to something almost pleading. "Listen, Aaron, maybe I was too harsh in that meeting, but the market isn't ready for such dramatic changes. We could integrate some of your ideas gradually. Please put in a good word with Roger." I thought of every dismissed concept, every public criticism, every shattered prototype. I thought of him claiming my ideas as his failed experiments, using my work as an example of what not to do. "Some things can't be fixed once they're broken," I said quietly, "just like trust." I ended the call and turned off my phone. Whatever came next, I needed rest first. The following Monday morning brought an email I wasn't expecting. Roger Bennett wanted to see me in his office, not the conference room. His office. When I arrived, Brandon was already there, looking pale and tight-lipped. Roger gestured to an empty chair across from his desk. "Aaron, I've spent the weekend reviewing project files and talking to people. It's become clear that there's been a significant misalignment between company values and division management." He turned to Brandon. "Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning to a marketing consultant role. Aaron, I'd like you to head our new Veterans Medical Solutions division." Brandon's face contorted. "You can't be serious. Over one engineer's pet project?" "No," Roger replied firmly. "For creating a hostile work environment, misrepresenting company work to external parties, and deliberately undermining innovation that aligns with our core mission." The board met yesterday evening. This decision is final. As Brandon gathered his materials and left with security, Roger turned back to me. "Aaron, you'll have complete autonomy over design direction and team composition. The VA has already submitted a preliminary order for 500 units across 3 device categories. What about the IoT division?" I asked. "That'll continue under different management. But our focus is shifting back to practical solutions that serve real needs. Your father would be proud." Roger knew about my dad. Of course he did. He'd built this company on similar principles before the business school consultants convinced him that everything needed to be connected to the internet. 3 months later, the first production run of our mechanical mobility devices shipped to VA centers in 8 states. The feedback was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans maintaining independence despite power grid failures. Rural communities developing local repair expertise that created new economic opportunities. Sarah helped me move into my new office on the executive floor. "Dad, I'm proud of you. Grandpa would be too." She was right. My father had spent his life maintaining equipment that kept Marines alive. Now I was building equipment that kept veterans independent. The circle felt complete. The wall in my new office featured a photo of my father in his Marine uniform, standing next to a Jeep he'd rebuilt from spare parts somewhere in the jungle. Next to it hung my new business cards. Aaron Rodriguez, Vice President of Veterans Medical Solutions. Diana stopped by during my first week in the new role. We've had inquiries from 12 additional states about procurement programs. The demand is exceeding our most optimistic projections. "Any word on Brandon?" I asked. "He found a position with a competitor, though industry sources suggest his reputation took a significant hit. Hard to recover from being publicly wrong about such a fundamental design philosophy." Roger remained actively involved in our division, his original passion for problem-solving seemingly reignited by our work. During our weekly meetings, he'd share stories from the company's early days. when engineering decisions were made by engineers, not MBA consultants. We lost our way for a while, he admitted one afternoon, examining prototypes for our next generation standing frame. Started chasing trends instead of solving problems. You reminded us who we used to be. As for me, I found something I hadn't